Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Colin Little. I'm a security engineer here at Centripetal Networks, where we operate a fully managed, intelligence-driven, zero-trust architecture that's designed to sit over the top of the entire enterprise. And I'm going to show you today exactly what that looks like. As I said, my name is Colin Little. I also have with me our VP of Strategic Accounts and Alliances. He's sitting right over there, Chris Gibbs. Thanks for joining us today, Chris. And today what we're going to talk to you about as far as how Centripetal and Dynics partner together and what we bring to the table in that partnership is we're going to tell you how we work together, why we've partnered together. We're going to give you a high-level technical overview of our service, which differs greatly from ICS360.Defender and also complements it greatly. We're going to show you some samples of what we found in the ICS space as far as cyber risks, risks to operations, and things like that. We're going to demo some live traffic if we have some time. We're going to talk about the future and where we're going with all of this, and talk about some next steps with the crowd here and with Dynics and with the world in general. So why are Dynics and Centripetal partnering together? I think the answer is pretty inherently clear in the news these days. The operational technology, critical infrastructure, manufacturing, workspace, anything that uses operational technology is a huge target for threat actors nowadays, especially given the geopolitical situation. There are a lot of groups who do harm to good people that are after folks just like you. And they leverage assets in both the IT network to attack the operational technology ICS network. Phishing email hits Sally, Sally's hosed, and whatever she can get to from there is what gets damaged, right? And I hope that none of you have been through that scenario, but that's just how it goes in the world today. And thankfully, the implementation of operational technology and the best practices and how you folks do it has come so far for so long that I've heard a lot of improvements in how you are securing those systems and securing your operations. So that is good, but the threat actors are just going to try harder, and that's why we're here today. So why else are Dynics and Centripetal partnering together? We both have the same fundamental philosophy. There's a trend in the cybersecurity community today that says, hey, if we can detect the threat, then we can do something about it. Why not do both? Why not only have the ability to detect, but also to stop it? I mean, one of the reasons why I came over to Centripetal is because we can apply some fundamental intelligence practices in the intelligence lifecycle. Once we turn that known bad into proven bad, why not just stop it, right? And that's what we're doing here today. That's what Dynics is doing here today. And that's why the partnership works so well. Our combined offering between Dynics and Centripetal provides protection and visibility from the internet to the factory floor. So we're predominantly watching north-south traffic, anything going to and from the internet, anything coming in and out. Dynics is on the inside telling which can talk to what and how. And those two things together can provide not just protection, but also a lot of visibility into the operations of the infrastructure that runs those operations. Any questions so far? Cool, let's get into some meat and potatoes. But first, about us. So Centripetal's actually been around for, what do you say, Chris, like 12 years?
12 years.
But only for the last 4 have we really been selling this clean internet service. A large portion of our beginnings was spent engineering what we call the rule gate, which is the threat intelligence gateway that I'm going to show you. That's a key component of the service. That's our enforcement and protection appliance. Now, also spend, developing that enforcement point. We were developing the service that we wrapped around that enforcement point. Originally, we sold it just like you sell a firewall. Here's your appliance, Mr. Customer. Have fun setting it up and operating it. And what we found is that there's a huge skills gap in the industry, a huge resource shortage in operating these tools. And that while it's possible to find the human resources to drive these things, I can work on my car a little bit. I can do the oil changes. I can do the brakes. But when the transmission blows up and I need to completely rebuild the thing, I go to somebody who specializes in that. And that's what our clients really needed. They need somebody who has an institutional knowledge of the threat landscape as it changes day to day. They need somebody who has an intimate familiarity with all the vulnerabilities that are being discovered and disclosed to the public that make enterprises targets for any script kiddie out there who can, blast a scan across the internet. And what they really need is they need to be able to focus on their own operations. If I'm a manufacturing facility, I focus on manufacturing. I don't want to stand up my own cybersecurity operations center and get into two businesses all at once. So that's one of the things that we learned over the last 10 or 12 years and why we provide this as a service. Throughout that journey, we've done a lot of cool things and grown a lot. We worked with the Department of Homeland Security and were awarded a couple of contracts through their research and development. And a lot of that was through developing the Threat Intelligence Gateway. We've been growing like crazy. Last year, we were ranked number 76 on Deloitte's top 500 fastest growing technology companies. So it's been a long and crazy road, and we're excited to keep growing into this as that threat landscape changes day in, day out. Anything you want to add, Chris?
No.
Cool. So why do we do what we do? Everybody knows the threat landscape is getting worse. Attacks are becoming more sophisticated. The systems that are being built, the vulnerabilities that are inherent in them are easier to exploit. And as these enterprises are going about their day-to-day, they're trying to find budget to implement these cybersecurity tools. But one of the reasons why I came over to Centripetal is because I was tired of paying $250,000 for a solution that only did half of what it said it was going to do. There's a huge gap in return on investment for cybersecurity tools in general. And it's really kind of a minefield to navigate that, especially when you're dealing with some of the bigger, more established cybersecurity vendors. So getting that budget and investing that budget wisely are hard. Traditional tools are kind of insufficient to protecting our enterprises against the problem. And that's not their fault. It's just that they weren't built to adapt to the scale at which cyber threats are present in the world today, or the cadence at which their techniques, tools, practices evolve from moment to moment. It's really difficult and challenging to find human resources to run these cybersecurity tools and programs. It's getting better. A lot of universities are incorporating cybersecurity programs. There's a lot of good talent coming out of those. But even so, it's difficult, just in general in the world today, to get somebody who wants to work. Somebody who wants to work in cybersecurity, which is a complex field, high stress environment, high operational tempo, it's challenging. And then there's the government who's coming down saying, you people have to, just like that, you people have to secure your stuff. They're clearing their desks saying, hey, we're scared. We want all of our critical infrastructure to be secure and we want it yesterday. And there's a bit of money being thrown around there, but nobody really knows what's going on. They're trying to provide guidance, but as the guidance comes out, it's already outdated. And these are problems. Again, nobody's fault. It's just the world we live in today. So this is why we do what we do. That real-time protection is key. I'm going to wet my whistle because now we're going to get into the good stuff. I'm going to tell you what our service is, what it does, and why it works. There's 4 key components. We work with intelligence. We enforce based on that intelligence. We can analyze the output of that intelligence and boil it down into what you really need to know from it. And we provide security operations out of that workflow. It's a continuous thing, and it does a great job at scaling to the problem. So starting at the top of the visualization is intelligence. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of threat intelligence, but every security tool uses it to some degree. If I use McAfee antivirus, I'm using McAfee's threat intelligence. If I'm using a checkpoint firewall, I'm using checkpoint's threat intelligence. The challenge that we understand now exists in the industry is that while the world has gotten better about sharing threat intelligence, there's two key challenges. One is that each of these different cybersecurity vendors has their own collection methods. And to that end, each vendor only possesses a small percentage of the actual threat landscape in indicators of compromise, the network data that they use to stop those threats from happening. What's worse is that because of technological challenges today, in the tools that they sell and operate, they can only operationalize a smaller percentage of that threat data. Because if they try to put it all on the wire, it'll slow things down, and slow is broken, right? So given that, they try their best, right? But what we've done, like I said earlier, is applied those traditional intelligence fundamentals. We partner with about 80 different producers of threat data, and we've taken responsibility for it. We've accumulated it all in one place. We've curated it and stripped out all the Google.coms. We've operationalized it so we can get it down to the enforcement point as a network rule to either monitor or shield on. And this is really important because there are so many different cyber threats out there on one side, and there's so many different types of technologies to protect on the other. And what we end up with this massive library of threat data is a unique opportunity to not just identify all sorts of different cyber threats from malware, spyware, command and control, ransomware, the traditional cybersecurity initiatives that I really want to stop, but also things like facilitating existing security operations objectives, stopping insider threats, right? The mad employee who decides to become an initial access broker to make some money and hand deliver ransomware into my environment. That's a thing now. There's also other cybersecurity objectives such as application control. Those unauthorized remote access applications that might exist in my environment that are really difficult to inventory that end up delivering ransomware, like when Kaseya was hacked. And that was just last year. Let's see, what else? All those brute forcing attacks towards my public facing services, like my web servers, my email servers, that I have to have open so that I can operate as a business. Denial of service attacks from the outside. Attacks from around the world that I haven't been able to analyze and can't really understand. These are all things that the intelligence that we take responsibility for gives us visibility into as we apply it to the enforcement point. But it also, since we manage those partnerships for our clients, gives us the context behind why something like a website or an IP address or a resource out there on the internet is in threat intelligence, right? So I don't just have this website and the vendor saying, oh, I need to block it. I know when, why, what it's doing. These things are important because unfortunately threat data is not black and white. It's not block or allow. It's, hey, if these three things together happen, you might want to be worried. If it's just one of those things, don't worry about it. And the analysis is kind of complicated. So that context is crucial. Corroboration is crucial. That's a traditional intelligence fundamental. I don't trust just one source that something is good or bad. That's very bad practice. I want to trust several sources that are all saying the same thing. And what this piece of the puzzle gives me is the ability to do that. Now let's get to the technology piece, the enforcement point. The truth of the matter is that traditional cybersecurity tools, again, were not built to deal with the problem of scale and cadence at which the known threat in the threat data changes. So the problem isn't that the cybersecurity community doesn't know about the threats that exist out there on the internet. It's that they know too much. There's a large volume of threat data out there, and getting it on the wire, analyzed, understood, and actionable are not something that today's cybersecurity tools can do. It's unfortunate, but it's why we do what we do. So the enforcement piece of this service is called the Rule Gate. It's a threat intelligence gateway. It was purpose-built so that we can, if we wanted to, put the whole library of threat data on there, on the wire. It sits in line between the ISP and the firewall in a traditional configuration. And I'm talking normal enterprises, financial institutions, higher education. The operational technology industry is a bit of a different animal, but I understand you use IT assets, so the basic premise is pretty much the same.
And one thing this doesn't show is we do sit in line between the ISP and the firewall security stack. We have also tap in behind the customer network so that we can grab the IP address of the internal asset pre-net. And then with ICS360.Defender, we also grab the IP address of the OT-ICS network pre-net, and then we stitch all of that together in where Colin's going to go.
So you do that like through a span connection, or how do you do that?
Span or a tap, yeah.
Yep.
So with on the IT network, either we're putting in a physical device and tapping it, or we're getting a span port off the internal switches, and then we're getting it from ICS360.
Thanks, Chris. I really needed that drink of water.
I figured as much.
Awesome. And when we first install into a new environment, we put this thing in 100% monitor mode. And what we end up delivering as I go and show you the different components of the service is a continuous workflow at this enforcement point, where we continuously add new threat data as it's available so that we can analyze the output. And this is the reporting piece. So as the Rule Gate's sitting in line with all this threat data on it, every time it sees traffic in the context of threat data, so something that has an indicator of compromise in it, an IP address or a website or something else that one of our partners has a threat report on, it sends a syslog event up to our reporting tool, which is built on Splunk. We have an app that you can download from Splunk Base. It's called Quick Threat for Splunk, and it's got all the tools that we use to analyze and visualize that threat data, so that as these millions and billions of machine-generated events come in, we can really boil it down and deliver some valuable security metrics to prove return on investment once we start knocking all that off the wire, but also zero in on the thing that the client really needs to know as far as what's a threat to their environment. And then, of course, there's the partnership that occurs. Having a human drive the entire service for our clients allows them to apply their institutional knowledge of the threat landscape. It allows them to apply their intimate familiarity of the threat data that we operate. It allows them to build an operational knowledge of the client's own network so that we can understand what services they need to do business. We can understand what the culture is there. We can understand all sorts of things, the technology that they operate, and what sort of risks they're really scared of, what they need to get executive buy-in to make changes. These things are all important to cybersecurity. It's not just stopping the bad guys. It's getting the good guys to the right place, leading that horse to water, right? And also giving them that human resource. Having a human drive the service for a lot of our clients is borderline staff augmentation. And giving them that resource also means they don't have to hire a tier 3 analyst who knows all this stuff and worry about retaining that human resource. It will always be there, right? And that's the security operations part of the service. And all these things come together to arrive at this. Once we get all that threat data on the wire, on the enforcement point, and we've monitored it, analyzed the output, and decided it was bad, we've actually turned that threat data into intelligence for our clients to prove hostile intent. We've reported it to them, we've gotten their business decision. They say, yeah, that's not part of our business, you can knock it off the wire. Through that continuous workflow, we arrive at an ideal shielding posture where 90% or more of all events observed in the context of threat intelligence are shielded either before they come from the internet to attack my enterprise or leave one of my laptops, desktops, whatever, to fly free to the internet and participate in command and control. So in this way, the service becomes the first line of defense and the last line of defense for our clients' enterprises. And what's left over is a much smaller number of events that prove to be lower confidence threat data, partial indicators that need to be pushed, pieced together to prove that hostile intent, or maybe even dormant indicators that haven't really done anything for months to try and drop off threat intelligence, but we can identify those too and get those in front of our clients to make sure that they have that. And what we're seeing on the screen is a real report that was captured for a week-long period. This was at the data center of a sprawling regional business campus. So it's a lot of traffic, right? And you can see in that week-long period, we shielded nearly 500 million events. And it's that massive amount of event volume reduction where the client can really see this thing work. These are events that aren't hitting their firewall and generating logs there, triggering security alerts for their analysts to run around like chickens with their heads cut off trying to respond to them, or generating alerts in their other tools such as their IDS, IPS. And what's left over in the context of cybersecurity, when something does fire, it becomes a lot more rich and actionable. And this is important. It reduces that alert fatigue for the downstream tools, people, and processes. And what we see up top here is what's contained in their policy. And this is why I say contemporary security tools just can't do this at this scale. So I used to be on the enterprise side and, operating a firewall. I could create a custom list of maybe 1 to 200,000 rules. And here we have hundreds of millions of indicators of compromise. Some days it's billions. Part of that scale problem isn't just getting all these IOCs on the wire. It's the fact that depending on the source, one day there could be 500, the next minute there could be 5 million, depending on what's going on in the threat landscape. So the scale of the problem changes wildly moment to moment. And the system that we've built and engineered can adapt to that scale moment to moment without crashing and rolling over. So now I want to get into the nitty-gritty. Of those smaller percentage of events that we didn't shield yet, how do we boil those machine-generated events down into what is actionable for the client? Because numbers are numbers, and numbers are great, right? But how do we apply the context? So when we do find something, we write up an advanced threat detection report. And what I have here is sort of a table of contents of some of the events that I've selected from our history, my 4 years here anyway, to show and share with you about things that we found, why they're bad, and how we presented those to our clients so that they could find them actionable. So in this first event, what we were in the unfortunate position of telling our client is that we saw some outbound torrenting traffic that was bypassing their firewall. And at first they told us, you know, we know our users have a bit of an addiction to torrenting files, movies, whatever. We have it blocked in the firewall. It's not a big deal. Why are you reporting this to us? And we were able to show them in the syslog of the events, because we capture all the network traffic metadata. So we were able to show them that 15% of the traffic was actually seen flying free to the internet. 85% was knocked down by the firewall. But if I'm evaluating the effectiveness of my security tools, 85% is not good enough. That's not a passing grade. Especially when you consider that some of the things that these torrenting seeds were going out to were things like compromised Hikvision DVRs and to some really unsavory places in the world that might have been getting a lot of visibility that I wouldn't want for myself, right? So what we're able to do is using these 16 threat intelligence feeds that 2 of them are listed here, we're able to act as a layer of security on top of their existing security stack and supplement their existing policy to this activity. We're able to shield that traffic. We're able to pull the packet captures and see the torrenting handshakes, the BitTorrent handshakes, to prove to them beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's what this was. We're able to provide the internal host participating in the activity, and we're able to move on with our lives, essentially. So what's important about this one is that it shows to me very clearly that sometimes we rely on our tools a little too much without validating. And that's what this service is really good for, is validation, as far as what's actually getting out and what's not. Yeah. The next one is phishing. Everybody loves phishing, right? Especially the bad guys, because it works so well. In this example, what we saw was, you know, some poor person at 192.168.142.53 went to jetblue.com, but they forgot the E at the end. This could have easily been, you know, a fat-fingered, you know, website entry. Unfortunately, the threat reports that we were pulling said that this was more linked to phishing. So what we did was we corroborated it by not just trusting one provider's word for it, right? Zetalytics was the threat data that we had on hand that caught this activity on the wire. But we also went out to Fortinet. We also went out to a couple of other sources to say, hey, what do you think about this website? And they agreed with the original provider's ruling. What we also did was we said, okay, so the reports say it's phishing, but what's it actually doing? So we went out and sandboxed that for the client. And you can see here in figure 2 down here that when we go to jetblue.com without the E at the time, I'm sure it's been taken down by now, but it actually gets redirected to this trippleairway.com, which is not JetBlue. And when we look at what that looks like, it actually goes, in this example, to a bogus search engine that can take us any number of bad places out there on the internet. And in fact, search engine results poisoning is one of the contemporary malware family's way of distributing itself as well. I was just reading a news story the other day. So this still works too, unfortunately. Not the website, but the technique. So what we're able to do for this client is we're able to promote this threat intelligence feed to shielding. And why this is important is because it not just blocks this website, but all of its bad buddies that Zetalytics knows about. And again, there's 3,500 of these threat intelligence feeds. Some of them are high confidence, some of them are not. All of them are good to monitor on. And this is what we're looking for. We're looking for good candidates to shield on so that as we go about our business, we're not going to jetblue.com without the E, but when we try to go to jetblue.com, it doesn't get shielded. So allowing those good connections and siphoning off the bad ones is what we're really aiming for. And since this client had some technical resources, we also included as a reference on the bottom here, a direct link to the sandbox results. So they could see all the technical details for themselves. WannaCry ransomware. What we're able to see here and how we were able to help our client was a couple of different things. One, when the ransomware event occurred in their enterprise, we were able to see a couple of things. One, we were able to see and stop the command and control domain going out to the internet that would have allowed them to create encryption keys and begin encryption in the environment. This is extremely important. It doesn't remove the malware from the machine, but if it can't encrypt, it can't steal. If it can't steal, if it can't encrypt, it can't destroy, then the malware just sort of sits there until we can respond to the incident, right? And that's one of the reasons why the shielding component is so important. It's probably the quickest and most effective remediation that we've been able to provide in a lot of the events that we found here. Whereas true incident response and documentation and technical implementation, it takes time. What we also saw was that this asset was, after the initial infection, it started trying to scan the internet on port 445. Excuse me, which is how WannaCry loves to spread and continue propagating. So we advised the client to contain that asset, prevent further exploitation, eradicate, restore from backups, all the fundamentals. But where we were really able to help out in the end was that all that scanning, because it was discovered after the fact that they weren't blocking 445 on the way out. And we're not a firewall, so we weren't blocking that for them. We were blocking all the stuff they were trying to get to on threat intelligence, but it landed them on a couple of threat lists from a couple of our providers as scanning the internet. So what we're able to do is after they remediated that asset, we're able to work with our providers on their behalf to remove their internet infrastructure from threat intelligence, which could have hindered their normal business operations. In a lot of ways, we've been able to use that partnership not just to identify threats to our clients, but also use it in a counterintelligence perspective. If our clients are in threat intelligence, why, when, what happened, and deliver that to them as well.
Before you go on this one, the next couple ones are from specific findings that Centripetal found during a trial on customers who had OT ICS networks. When this happened, this one interesting, I think this one, or maybe it's the next one. It was a large university campus in the Northeast. We were trialing for the IT infrastructure of that university. We were sitting between the ISP and the fire. Well, at the university, there were a number of other sub-networks, one of which was their power generation plant, which powered the university and local municipalities and towns in the area. And Colin was actually the lead security engineer and analyst on that opportunity. And he was able to find things that eventually involved us with some three-letter agencies because a threat actor was involved in it. When this happened, a light went off in my head and said, we're doing a great job protecting the IT network. And when things traverse from OT to IT, we're there to block and protect. But what I need is a partner. And it was at that time that this idea started baking in my head. And then when we got together with Dynics, there happened to be US Cyber Command, part of US DoD, was putting on a rapid prototype event to protect a factory. And via some relationships we both had that were shared, I was able to get to Jeff, and that's where I got started. But it was all these next few incidents that caused me to realize that I needed an OT partner, because you guys don't want to deal with IT companies, you want to deal with OT ICS companies, but we've got a great story to tell, and you'll see why. So go ahead, Carl.
Thanks, Chris. And that is the next event. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess this is more philosophical. I think, for quite a few of us, we've been sitting in these rooms and these symposiums for over 10 years. And, at one point, I think we all nodded our head that, as you described, part of your effort is finding it, understanding it, and then blocking it. Years back, we were more concerned with the fact that while you're doing all that, the bad actor's already on to the next one.
Yeah, so actually our theory is blocking. If somebody else knows about it, shielded, our term for shielding is stopping all risky and no mission traffic. The things we're doing here, where we're detecting, is the monitored events that we're not shielding on. And you saw that earlier example, we were blocking 99.9% of the events that came through. We didn't let those in the network. They had been malicious on somebody else's network. Why prove it again on your network, whoever you are? So we stop it there, but then we do allow some things through because either we're in a trial or the data that we get is just, the confidence in it is high. And then we do detect and respond, and then we move those feeds and that infrastructure to shield it. But our theory is, if somebody else deems it malicious, somebody else got hosed, why do you need to do it again?
Well, that's where we've got, customers say, you guys, as good as you are, and we believe you're good, are not gonna get everything. All I care about is getting back up and running.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we got an example here at the end with Log4j. Log4j was perfect for that. Everybody had Log4j. Well, we were blocking our feeds for Log4j, which allowed our customers to then go and do the remediation efforts that they needed to do to get it up to the right levels. It was no longer malicious, but the entire time they were shielded and protected. And did we know we were blocking our Log4j? No. It was just that infrastructure was in a feed by two of our providers because threat actors reuse the same infrastructure. They're very lazy. And there's an assembly line for the attack, just like there's an assembly line in you guys' operations. One group does the reader. One group figures out the survey. Another group will do the exploits on target. Another group will do the command and control. And we get intelligence across the whole spectrum. What separates us from everything else, and I used to be at Cisco, I used to be at SourceFi, and cybersecurity for a long time, is we can deal with the scale and the cadence of the change. Because we're stateless, we're an insanely fast filter, less than 50 microseconds of latency, not anything. And we can stop and go. And we're gonna do a demo, by the way, live traffic, and you'll see this in action.
Yeah, and to your point, sir, so the question for the folks on the virtual call is that how do we operate knowing that we're not going to catch everything? So there's been a debate going back and forth about the scale and everything like that. But one of the things that I didn't touch on is that one of the crucial parts of our management of the threat data is that we update it as the provider updates it. So of those 80 or so providers that we work with, say IBM X-Force updates their threat data every 15 minutes. But Department of Homeland Security updates theirs every day, and the Abuse IP database updates theirs every minute. As they update that, we curate it and send it down to the enforcement points and the disposition that it's taken in those specific environments, so that as they're operating moment to moment, the threat now is what's being protected against on their environment. Does that make sense? And by multi-sourcing those observations, it's almost like a barrier maze in front of their enterprise, but all in one spot, where they need to pass through not just one antivirus, not just one firewall, but 80 firewalls using 3,500 different feeds of information. It's like a much wider net being cast, if that makes sense. But you're absolutely correct. There is no silver bullet. There's no one magic wand that's going to make an environment completely secure. Did that answer the question you were getting to, sir? Excellent. Yeah, the change in the threat data is actually portrayed. I know it's difficult to see in this slide, but it's portrayed by these little arrows next to the number of indicators compromised. Some days they go up, some days they go down. And that's important too because, say an IP address was leased by some shady virtual private service provider one day and then the next day Google buys it. We don't want to block Google. We do want to block shady VPS services though. And as those changes occur on the landscape and those infrastructure age off threat data, they also age off of our threat data. So we don't end up blocking things that shouldn't be blocked. It's actually one of the challenges that enterprises have in implementing threat data. So an enterprise has change management considerations, and when they say they subscribe to a threat data feed, right? Even though it's covering only a small percentage, operationally speaking, they have to receive that feed. They need to vet it, test it, implement it, and get it through change management. And that process usually takes a couple of weeks. In terms of cybersecurity, that's a couple of centuries. By the time they get that on the wire in their firewall, like you said, they're already on, the threat actors are already on to the next one. So that's why we do what we do. Okay, so these two examples are actually from facilities that have operational technology or industrial control systems using human-machine interfaces to administer them. What we found here, and this is not the example Chris was talking about that led to an investigation by a 3-letter agency. This was at a smaller utilities company that operates pumps and wells and things like that. Now, in a couple of my experiences in cybersecurity, there's a fallacious concept called risk offloading, where if I hire a third party to do some work, the job of doing that work, the responsibility of completing that work and completing it securely is on that third party. And that was present here as well. So what happened was the utility company set up these human-machine interfaces so they could operate their pumps and wells more, efficiently. Well, the contractor set up this website and exposed it to the internet so that he could remotely access the physical panels, make configuration changes, things like that from wherever he was. It was pretty slick. The problem was he didn't secure that website. It was open to the internet. He didn't place it behind a VPN. He didn't configure it to use authentication. He just sort of set it up for the world to see. The other issue that existed here was that the physical panel's remote access capability was turned on by default. It was an unfortunate example of how human-machine interface operational technologies sometimes are not built with security in mind.
No, there's a reason for that. They were trying to build vehicles or to build parts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you gotta keep that in mind, that we're not building these lines to satisfy cyber rules. A lot of these things that would look really stupid to you guys are really important to the guys that are making the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's always been the battle. I think Gary chuckled when we heard that comment, because that's what we're faced with, is the pressures of making the product.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And not sacrificing the integrity of the process to satisfy cyber. It's
the yin and the yang of it.
Yeah.
The reason why we deliver this as a service is because the threat is out there, and that's what we. And if we can stop them from getting in and getting access, well, then you keep going on and doing what you're doing.
My best example is whenever the repair technician is going to fix a broken line, and he has to log in and enter a password, that is extra time that the line is down. He shouldn't have to do that. At that physical location, at that point in time, he's authorized to fix the damn thing. And if he forgets his password and now he has to call to help to get it reset, you've blown it. I mean, so no, at that moment in time, at that physical location, physical security should be sufficient for that particular cyber event. But try telling it to an IT person.
That's the other problem, right? There is no one size fits all for security.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But you can set it up so that, hey, this particular access port is physically secure. IT, don't bother with the.
I think Jeff's got a solution for you.
I
Scan your back.
Yep. No, I agree. And there's a lot of other things that.
My comment to that, for what you're saying, the problem is manufacturing for too long has been, well, we build parts. And we build parts. That's all we do is build parts. And we used to build some pretty crappy parts. Our quality was for crap in the States until we started to say, okay, we gotta build quality parts. Now we're gonna have to change, because if we don't, the Japanese are gonna continue to kick our ass in manufacturing cars. So we better start building quality parts, so getting out the back door is no longer the only answer. It's we gotta get them out the back door built well. That's changing again. It's this third shift in paradigm. It's, we've got to get them out the door, built well, and securely. Meaning they can't be compromised, right? I can walk into a plant floor today, and I had this conversation at Sands a couple of years ago in Detroit when I did the Sands Automotive Summit. And it was a bunch of people who had probably never spent a day on the plant floor of their life talking about cars. And they were talking about all this cool security they're doing on vehicle and with the entertainment info systems. I said, yeah, but you know what controls all that? It's the ECU you put in that car. And I bet you I could walk up your plant floor right now, program a few ECUs myself, throw them in the dunnage, and I own that car when you power that bad boy up. You can have all the other security you want. I'm already under it. And, you know, there's a reason they used to call me Neo when it came to Canva. I could own your car if I wanted to. And again, that's the shift that's got to take place. So we can't, it's a balancing act between how do we build a car with quality, and securely to where we're not compromising the security. Because at the end of the day, if I have anything in your vehicle that allows me to own it, that's a safety problem, right? I can decide at any time with my firmware that your wheel speed indicator doesn't actually say 60 miles an hour, it says 3, so let's shift gears, right? I can do that all day. So it's a continuing evolution of what we have to do, and unfortunately, we've adopted this, let's just take IT craft, throw it down on the plant floor with all the problems that come with it. So it's exacerbated our problem. I told Rockwell a couple of years ago, I said, the fact that I have to put an IP address on a PLC is an abomination. I should never have to worry about an IP address on a PLC. It should just work. Boot P, that's an abomination. Have you ever thought of boot P? Should be taken out back to the horsewhips. That level of requirement was because nobody thought past, oh, it's IP, it's Ethernet, so we should just have IP addresses and Ethernet because that's what they do in IT. Yeah, but that's a huge pain in the ass on the plant floor because your electricians and typical OT security or typical OT controls engineers. I laugh when people say, what do you think with IPv6 on the plant floor? Yeah, put people on the plant floor and put IPv4, right? You think you're going to put 6 on the plant floor? You know how that works out for you. I'll be dead and retired before I allow that. So, but I mean, dead and retired. Dead and retired. That's a fact.
Here, I like to know. You put Ethernet on my plant floor over my dead body. I said, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you know, in my experience, at least in facilitating both operations and security in an IT environment anyway, it's usually the business decision that drives those things. And unfortunately, in this example right here, that was taken away from them. This was done without their knowledge. There were a lot of things that could have been suggested to make this more secure. Like, hey, if you need this access, do you need read only or do you need write? So this guy was just looking at the telemetry that was being put out by the system. He wasn't using that remote access capability. It could have been turned off, and their operations wouldn't have been impeded. The other unfortunate thing is that there's all sorts of automated reconnaissance being performed by the bad guys for anything that's touching the internet. And in this example, there's a tool out there called Shodan. And I'm not sure if any of y'all are familiar with it, but it's essentially a search engine for internet-connected services and devices. Well, Shodan scanned this website, and it's basically used as a free target list for bad guys. They can go here, they can search for anything that Shodan has scanned and tagged as ICS or OT. They can go in and find their targets if that's what they're looking to do. In this case, what Shodan did was it posted a screenshot of all the configurations that it can change. It can turn wells on and off. It can see what the reservoir level was. It can set alarm. It can see what the alarm set points are. It really kind of scared the crap out of him. So what we're able to do for this guy is we're able to shield that asset from any sort of threat actor infrastructure communicating with it, seeing it, even knowing it was there, while allowing the good connections to occur so that they could respond to this information. They could decide if this website should be up or not. They actually contacted the technician, and that's where they learned, oh, I just look at the telemetry. I don't actually change configurations remotely. So they were able to turn the remote access capability off on the physical panel. All business decisions that may have been better served prior to implementing the website, right? And now we'll move on to the last example. So this is less an example of how we present information to the client and more a story that unfolded over the course of 6 to 9 months. So as Chris said, we inserted a rule gate at one time up at closer to the ISP level at a regional facility. There were several hundred sub-networks below this point, and one of them was a cogeneration power plant. Even sitting so high up above all of these sub-networks, we were able to see the compromise that had occurred at this facility. What had happened was the IT work at this facility had been contracted out, and the contractors were not doing what they said they were going to do. They weren't patching and updating systems. They were putting in home-grade networking equipment instead of the enterprise-grade stuff they had told the client they were going to put in. One of those things was a Linksys router that has a lot of vulnerabilities. The threat actors used a technique called universal plug-and-play NAT rule injection to manipulate the access control list on the firewall from the outside and insert any rule they wanted. Really, they opened up port 445 SMB. They opened up remote desktop protocol. They opened up database protocols. They pretty much had a field day and did whatever they want with the access control list on this firewall and used it as a launch point to attack the human machine interface and database servers and web space VMs on the inside of the facility. What was discovered after the initial reporting of the incident was that an exacerbating circumstance was that the IT folks hadn't been updating operating systems on the inside. So there were several deprecated and vulnerable operating systems running things like HMI servers, HMI client PCs, including Windows XP, including Windows Server 2003 on their database server, and that the bad guys were able to establish remote access tools on these IT assets that were running operational technology. The third and final sort of bad thing that we're able to see here is that there was a web access VM, an HMI-based Rockwell automation web application that, similar to the last event, had been placed outside the facility and was configured with no authentication or anything like that. And it was read-only, but it was displaying all the operational status information from inside the power plant. What valves were turned on and off, what temperatures things were running at. And based on the SQL injection and things like that we were seeing against this web access VM on the outside that displayed all this information, we were able to sort of validate that when a bad guy tried to attack something or tried to turn a valve on or off inside the facility, they were able to use this web access VM to validate whether their change worked or not. So what we were able to do for this client, one, we got them a rule gate right in front of the facility. We dropped down from the ISP level and we got in front of this facility so that we could zero in and protect it.
Yeah, we got the PO on that much faster than we got the PO on the university.
Much faster. And this was in the middle of them trying to, figure out how to bring the facility up to enterprise standards. We were able to get in a rule gate and shield that facility from all of these outside attacks, which effectively stopped the threat. No longer were bad guys able to get in and try to change something or exfiltrate stuff from the database or anything like that, which took a lot of the heat off the fire while this client was bringing things inside up to their enterprise standards and remediating. So that was very helpful to them. But they're still a client today, so that is good. And of course, heads rolled, the IT contracting company got fired. So there's a happy ending to every story. Any questions? I believe that was the last example of the events.
Let's do a quick demo.
Sure.
To show them.
And we're really want to go with that. Do you guys do anything like with encrypted communications, right? So I think of like a VPN tunnel, right?
Mhm.
So Jeff goes and connects to the guest Wi-Fi here today.
Yep.
His laptop gets compromised, and then he goes and hotspots to his phone and VPNs into Dynics, right?
Yep.
Now, essentially, he's created a tunnel that's encrypted into his manufacturing zone, right?
Right.
Do you guys have anything today that can help prevent that, right? Like, can you guys be the VPN? Can you be the man in the middle with certificates? Or how do you guys look at that?
So the challenge with encrypted traffic is one, certificate management and then PII data.
Yeah.
So one of the beautiful things about what we're able to do is if the 443 traffic, the IP address of the domain is on known threat database, we can be a TLS proxy and decrypt it, and then we can see the URL, we can even put it through an IDS engine that we have, and grab the PCAP. For what you're saying there, the challenge would be, we need to write a rule that said, because for us, we trigger on what's known bad by somebody.
Yeah,
It
right.
can either-
You're not able to decrypt his payload, basically, right?
Well, see, that's something we can do, because since I have that certificate on my side, there's no reason he can't look at me and say, hey, I've got a new encrypted connection coming in. Do you have a certificate that will allow me to decrypt this inline? And then I can hand him that certificate through our secure connection.
Yeah, so what you're saying is if from a VPN standpoint, right, if we handed you the certificates, you could support
We could decrypt on a selective basis. We don't want it all. If you go to Bank of America, and if you go to Blue Cross Blue Shield, I don't want to look at that traffic. But if you go to Bank of America, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or something that's some kind of homoglyph, I forget what that's called.
Homoglyph, yep.
Yeah, we want to look at that traffic because it's a malicious site and they're doing some kind of password harvesting, credential harvesting. And so because of the fact that we filter against CTI, it's a very small subset of traffic that we have to decrypt in an IDS and then PCAP, and we're able to throw the whole kitchen sink at it. And then what we're saying here is we also have the ability to do custom whitelist and blacklist rules, so we would just have to customize a little bit.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, coming from a systems integrator standpoint,
Yeah.
right? We connect to hundreds or whatever VPN customers all the time, right? So how do we prevent ourselves from protecting the customers where we're connecting to a customer's network and then we're spreading malware to them?
Because
right?
the
Because
reality
we're
of life is it's the trusted third party.
Exactly.
Who introduces 75% of the threat, just like in your bottling scenario.
Exactly.
It's always the trusted, it's many times the trusted third party.
Yeah.
Kaseya supply chain attack,
Kaseya
SolarWinds
supply chain.
Orion. It's always
So
a
as
third party.
long, so my answer to that is what I'm saying first, as long as we can protect you on the TLS tunnel, as long as you're not going from a malicious site or have been to a malicious site, then we'll protect you. Let's do the demo,
Sure.
and then explain it during the demo.
Yeah.
So the demo is live network traffic. We've got what Colin's pulling it. Oh, he's got to pull that. So I'll let you go.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Yeah, so there's a lot of different techniques and processes that come with the service that we haven't really gotten into the weeds on yet. The concept that Chris is talking about is probable cause, and I can demonstrate that right now. What I have is some live network traffic pulled up from both our environment, because we have rule gates sitting out in front of our own corporate environments, and also Dynics environment. And over the last 24 hours, as you can see, unless we get into fractions of a percentage, we've shielded nearly 100% of the traffic that's come through in the context of threat intelligence. And we've only allowed 43 events through. To demonstrate.
And that's across both companies in the last 24 hours.
Mhm.
So anything that was deemed malicious, very few things got in.
Well, you tickled again on the philosophical, you said no bad.
No bad.
And for us troglodytes on the shop floor, we only care about no good.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So if I take the known bad off the table, why do you need that? So why do you need that knocking on your door? If I take the known bad away, and then Jeff allows only the known good, you should be pretty well protected.
Yep. There's a huge amount of synergy there because of the basic premise of how each of our things provide that protection. They come at it from each of the different angles.
Yeah, one of the chief, when you take the known bad out of the equation, one of the chief benefits to all the downstream tools, the firewall, the IDS, IPS, is the resource contention and the load on those tools becomes much easier. So in the IT world where you buy a next generation firewall from either source firewall, Firepower Services or Palo Alto with all of their app ID and everything, those are, it's like Josh was saying earlier, there's a linear process requirement for everything that they do. Well, if I take the known bad off the table, that resource contention reduces dramatically. You can throw a lot of your other resources at the app ID or at the whitelisting, which we don't do. Exactly.
Yeah, where our service is exclusive, saying, hey, this is bad. It's known bad in threat intelligence. It's proven bad through our analysis. You don't want it. ICS360.Defender is inclusive, saying, hey, this is authorized communication. Never stop this from happening from here to here.
And just as important, I'm going to jump in one more thing. Not only do we put the known bad on the table when it's known bad, but when the provider of the data then says, hey, I just churned, because threat actors buy domains and they buy URLs, but they only rent IP addresses. So in a given 24 hours of time, we got one provider that their IP feed churns 50% a day, and it's the latest 400,000 IP addresses. Try to put in 200,000 IP addresses today and take 200,000 out of it. We can't do it, so we've got an automated thing. When it churns back to being good, we take it out of the equation, which reduces our false positive rate. We still get some that we vet, but for the most part, our things are accurate because of the fact that we've got that time component to what we put on the wire.
I mean, a great example is we work a lot of companies from the Asia side of the world. A lot of companies from China. We see companies from China that we're going over there for a piece of software or some chipset or some board we wanted, we'll live, and then periodically we go out there for support. Well, we sit down for 30 minutes with these guys, and Colin's actually the analyst, and they'll go there and say, look, we found 237 outbound connections to these addresses in China. Of the 237 of them, we shielded 210 because they were identified as bad destination addresses. Of the remaining addresses, we've analyzed those, and we think that 20 of them are problematic, and we don't have a position one way or the other on these 7. Do you recognize them? We say, that's one of our suppliers we work with, that's one of the suppliers we work with, that's one of the suppliers we work with, shield everything else. And then from then on, I never see those again. If I see BitTorrents coming in and out, every 2 weeks they go in, they give us this analysis. You know what that's done for me? And Avery? Everything. We don't have to worry about incoming security like we did. And below their system is an ICS360.Defender who's doing all the rest of our stuff. So it's tremendous security, and when you watch through the whole ramp-up process of Dynics, it was interesting because they turned it all on, but they weren't shielding, they were just monitoring. And then as they started to accumulate data on the feeds coming in and out of Dynics, they said, okay, these are bad, these are known bad, right? So they said, should we try shielding on? And then we got to the point where we're like 99.99% shielded on feeds, and Avery and I, maybe every 2 weeks, they'll have one or two that they suggest we shield on, we're like, shield it. We've never had a problem, never had a complaint from manufacturer, never had a complaint from production. No one has ever said, we can't get to this, we can't get to that. And it's taken a level of security we had at Dynics up tremendously, which is why, we were partnered, we're working with them before, but the more we learned about the product and the deeper we got, I said, there's no reason, there's no way we're not doing this at Dynics. No way. There's nothing else like it.
It actually reminds me of another story. Before I show you the probable cause concept in the live traffic, one of our current clients is a defense contractor, defense subcontractor, who is ITAR compliant. They're not allowed to talk to places like China or anything like that. Well, we inserted for the trial, and we weren't shielding anything. We saw a massive amount of events going out to China. It was a huge surprise. When we were able to show them the internal IP addresses and where this was coming from, it turned out to be a test that they were performing. They were experimenting with Segway robots, bringing things from one end of their plant floor to the other. And this Segway robot was sending all of its telemetry data back to servers that were based in China. The unfortunate thing is, and this is true time and again in my experience here at Centripetal, is that this particular client didn't have any security tools, they didn't have any processes, they didn't have anything that alerted them to this activity that had not only put them on the radar for threat actors potentially in China, but also brought them so far out of their compliance regulatory and compliance standards that they were required to have in order to do business with the government. So, yeah, that was a good time too. Segway robots.
It's just data, so it's of course possible, but do you guys ever look at, like here, right, you monitor and basically allowed 15,000 events, right? Is there a way to like correlate that like back to the ICS360.Defender or the IT firewall and say, okay, of these 15,000 events, here's the 10 events that were actually allowed through the firewall?
We always do that.
Okay.
We always do, because of the fact that we're on the LAN side and the WAN side, we show you what traverses, what makes a successful connection. And all of our analysts have their own prioritization of how they look at things, but typically successful connections inside out is first. So that the successful connections outside in is second. And then block connections inside that get stopped either at the firewall or by us, that typically is third, because that means it's compromised. The exploit didn't happen, but the asset's compromised, or potentially.
I mean, it's been super nice. There's been several times they've said, we see a suspicious outbound connection, and between their technology and ours, we can narrow it down to the actual PC out on the production floor that made that outbound connection. We know where they went, how long they went there, and what they did while they were there, more or less. Did they download something? Did they upload something? And the question we get from them is, do we shield? And like, shield, right? If it's not something that I know we needed to do, shield it. Mm-hmm. And they can tell me in the last 2 weeks, that particular host has visited these 3 questionable sites this many times for this amount of time, and this is what they did.
So then you go and remediate your device to stop it from sending data out.
If we think that's a problem. So we will go find the whoever's PC that is, if it's QC or something, and we'll go out to them and find out what's going on. There's been a couple of times they've said, look, we suspect you've got a bot or something on a PC on the floor, just because of the behavior we're monitoring, right? And our IT guy out there go off line and say, yep, we do, right? It's phoning home, shut it down. We had one of our IT guys, he opened up a port in the ICS360.Defender so he could remote desktop into one of our Beam servers to do some work from home, which is fine as long as he manages it and shuts it down when he's done. He forgot. So these guys caught that and said, look, this port is open and it's been open for an unusually long amount of time. It's going to this IP address and the RDP protocol is active. What do we do? Like, shut down. And then we got into the ICS360.Defender and took the rule out that was allowed.
Yeah, so what we give people is time. By us shielding at the perimeter, you now have time to go remediate. And to your point, both of your points, like, we gotta get that floor running. We can't do it now. We gotta do it when we can do it, when there's a window, so that we can keep operating. Or we give people time. By taking the threat away, while you know it's there, you can just plan for it.
Yep. Applying all this threat data to the wire gives us that visibility, and having access to the context allows us to understand who, what, when, where, and why. Yep.
Yeah, and what's cool is they use a Suricata engine for their IPS IDS, and they're going to Suricata 4. The next gen ICS360.Defender uses Suricata 4. So picture, if you will, they detect this incoming bad connection or this incoming evilness. They can literally reach down to the ICS360.Defender and say, here's the Suricata rule you need to put in your engine. And we can start running the same Suricata rule on the other side. So now we've taken what they saw coming in or what we saw coming up, but we can go back to them as well. We've now blocked that for that known problem on both ends. Nobody had to mess with it, just it happened.
Yeah, I was actually going to use the probable cause IDS to demonstrate the probable cause concept, because you asked the question about encryption earlier, and the probable cause concept is how we avoid decrypting things like people's banking and health information traffic. The probable cause concept is that the secondary inspection function is only performed if there's a hit and threat intelligence first. So of these 15,748 events that were allowed through for further monitoring, they all went through probable cause IDS. And of them, probable cause IDS fired about 5,000 times. This provides me with a much more precise number of events to look through. It also reduces drastically the resource overhead required to perform the IDS function. So I can throw more Suricata rules on to the tune of 10 times as many as a traditional IDS IPS engine can, because they're looking at all the traffic and trying to apply that signature-based detection to all of it. We're just looking at what fired in threat intelligence first. So we could put about 60,000 Suricata rules on the wire, and the rule gate doesn't even blink. It's really cool. And then, as usual, all those syslogs go up to the quick threat for Splunk application. And as an analyst, I can very quickly go through here down to the signatures to sort of sort the wheat from the chaff. I can see that of those 5,000, nearly 5,000 were Microsoft Online Storage Client related stuff. That's just noise. I don't need to look at that. What's left over is much more rich for investigation. Remote utilities access tool activity. I might want to look into that. Dropbox user content download. If that's not authorized in my environment, I might want to look into that. Suspicious domain hosted in Central Africa. Well, gee, I know we do worldwide operations, but I'm pretty sure we don't do anything in Central Africa. Let's say I wanted to look into that. I can just click and the app brings me to the raw events. From here, I can find things like the precise internal IP address. Not have to translate the NAT using the date timestamps, which is a huge runaround, and geez, hopefully those logs were kept. I can see exactly which website it was going to, which this is actually a test that I did, now that I'm seeing that. It's a test that's designed to simulate exactly what Chris was talking about earlier, homoglyphs. This looks like Centripetal Networks, our website, but it's actually CentripetalNetworks.cf, not .ai. So to simulate the homoglyph, to trigger the IDS event, I performed this test. But this is a great demonstration of how we can still get this information despite the fact that this traffic was encrypted, right? This is 443 traffic. This was encrypted.
And the other thing about this application that we built, in the managed security service world, most people just get to see the sausage, they don't get to see how the sausage is made. We're a fully transparent service. So all of this data we provide to our customers or to our partners for their customers. So Jeff Avery can get on and do the threat hunting and do everything we do on this system. Yeah. What we've learned is that we train them. They get on once, they get on twice.
And they still let you do it.
And then they just let us do it. But you can trust us and have the ability to verify. This is fully transparent. All this data is exposed to the customer.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if it was Chris getting on doing the threat hunting, I'd probably log on and try to do it myself more often. But when it's Colin, I don't need to mess with it.
Jeff knows I'll call him if I see anything he needs to know about. Awesome, but that demonstrates the probable cause concept, a couple of the dashboards I like to live and breathe in here, how I use them, how they're usable for anybody who wants to, and some of the cool stuff that we can see. Chris, anything else you want me to demo? I know I'm already over my 45 minutes.
I think demo-wise, I think we're good.
You want to go over some future
So
plans?
some future, as we were talking about, we're getting syslog from ICS360 up into so that we can get the access. We've already built the dashboard boards with their next release of software to get that syslog. And then we're just going to start tuning down because I can throw the entire Cybersecurity rule stack at the data flow. Tuning it in IDS is a very timely, cumbersome job. We can be an automated tuning function for the ICS Defender to run the appropriate based on the threat and the server environment behind it. And then the last thing, our next steps, complete salesy, is this is what we do every time. When people want to test our service, they literally trial the service for 30 days. We can go between the ISP and the IT section, or we can go in any sub-network. We just need to be north of the ICS Defender. If you're thinking, you know, north is the internet and south is the OT network, we just need to be north of the ICS Defender.
That was a question that I had a little bit, Chris, is, you know, typically, you know, when you started, right, it was talking about being the IT firewall and the ISP, right?
Yeah.
But if I look at a manufacturing company and let's say I have 150 sites, right?
Yeah.
Is there any benefit in being right above my site firewall before I get to my IT network?
Yeah,
Before
because
I get to my
I
IT
guarantee
firewall.
you stuff is coming through that corporate firewall, because we sit on both sides of Palos. I sit on both sides of Cisco Firepower Service Checkpoint. They don't have the scale. Stuff's getting through, and we prove it every day. So being farther down, because that's the issue here, is right, where do you have access, where do you have control to? You only have control to here?
Yeah.
Put me as far north as you can put me. Do a trial. And then, you know, ultimately I want the whole world, but that's a different story, you know, I want that.
Do you do only physical appliances, or like in those
So,
cases
right-
where you wanted to be more in between the networks, can you do virtual appliances?
So right now, we're physical appliances, and we've got custom-made edge appliances, which Dynics wants to do in the next iteration. We do standard appliances, and then we sit in the cloud, but we're not virtual yet. Not virtual. But it's
What's on the roadmap, maybe?
it's absolutely right. I'll give you a Josh answer. Well, when you wouldn't need it,
I think that's in
You got a
501.
home edition from a house? Like,
So
Maybe the edge.
unit is in front of a number of our corporate executives' houses.
That's the
I
edge.
think-
Yeah.
We'll probably want to get a Dynex form factor for that.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Good.